have you been watching Star Trek Strange New Worlds on the Paramount Plus streaming service?
Brad, I gotta admit, I am a Trekkie or a Trekker or whatever they call themselves now. Trekster, Trek Monster, Trek Mania.
I don't think it was ever Trekster. I don't think it was, for the record, I don't think it was ever Trekster.
Brad, I'm fairly certain it was Trekster. Let's not correct me on that. No, but you know what? I a little bit got burned by the last Star Trek where they changed showrunners every half season, and it kind of the storylines went back and forth. So I have only passingly watched half of the pilot of Strange New Worlds. Is it good? Are you enjoying it?
I am loving it. I'm really enjoying the heck out of it. There's so much to like about that show. But if you haven't been watching, you've got to know that in this iteration of the Star Trek mythos, Spock has a fiancée.
Oh, really?
He's got a fiancée, and her name is T'Pring. And I just realized that Spock is dating a Don Martin sound effect. Do you remember Don Martin from Mad Magazine? Yeah, he's dating it, and it made me wonder, Dave, what's if they get married and he's dating a Don Martin sound effect? If they get married, what's that wedding reception going to be like? She's leading him around and saying, Spock, darling, I'd like you to meet some members of my family. And he's like, well, yes, fascinating. And she says, yeah, take this is, of course, my mother, Poit, and my father, Scroinch, and my brother, Sloit, and my sister, Gesplunked. But have you met my extended cousin, Pwang, and my other cousin, Splitch? And oh, here's a cousin. She and I grew up together. Badoink-a-doink. I'd like you to meet these cousins. Well, yes, fascinating. I can see the family resemblance. But wait, there's more. There's my uncle Dunt and my aunt Bazant and my niece Glitch and Stonk. And our second cousin twice removed. Yeah. This is my family, Spock. It's a family of Don Martin sound effects.
So, first of all, Don Martin, may rest in peace, is so happy right now to hear all of his sound effects being reused again. This is great. Second, are you joking? His actual fiancée is named T'Pring?
Her name is T'Pring.
T'Pring.
That's the sound of a 6/8 steel forged wrench bouncing off of Captain Klutz's forehead. That's the exact sound. T'Pring.
I was gonna say it sounds like that guy from Hollywood Squares when he goes like, "Oh, I won T'Pring." Oh, what was his name? The guy that would throw
Hollywood Squares. Well, Hollywood Squares was Paul Lynde. You may be thinking of Charles Nelson Riley, who was the upper right-hand corner of the Match Game.
I was thinking of Charles Nelson Riley, who he was occasionally on Hollywood Squares. Was he not in the early years?
Listen, he did all kinds of game shows. He was a fixture in late 70s TV.
Doesn't that sound like a Charles Nelson Riley sound? T'Pring!
T'Pring! Yeah,
But Don Martin, my goodness, what a fantastic cartoonist. Just for imagine being famous for not only amazing art, but he literally revolutionized using sound effects constantly to comedic effect.
Yeah.
What a tool in the toolbox that I don't dip into all that often. He used all the time and to great effect.
And also an artistic style that we never seen before and will never see again, right? I mean, you could not come close to Don Martin's art without being just a ripoff, without tracing his art. And before that, nobody was drawing like that. You can't find, especially head shapes and the body shapes, the way he drew fingers. He was literally one of a kind. When they made Don Martin, they broke the mold.
Don Martin had the energy of Barnum and Bailey, but in drawing form,
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
It was like carnivalesque joy in art form. But anyway, all right. So on the note that anytime Spock's fiancée walks in the room, Spock goes T'Pring. We'll start the show by saying hello, everybody, and welcome to ComicLab, the show about making comics
and making a living from comics. I'm Brad Guigar, the author of the Webcomics Handbook and the artist of Evil Inc.
And I'm his friend Dave Kellett, who enjoyed the fact that Brad had to think about that as he was saying that. I'm the cartoonist of Drive and Sheldon and the co-director of Stripped.
I lost my little sheet of paper. And this week's hour of comics advice is made possible by your support at patreon.com/comiclab. So Dave, Let's Talk Comics.
Let's Talk Comics, and it speaks to your professionalism that in year 5 of the podcast, you didn't need your little piece of paper, Brad.
I didn't. I had it memorized.
You have it stored all right upstairs, right up in the old T'Pring. You got it stored up there. You're ready to go. I will say this show is going out live to all of our ComicLab Live Gab pals over at patreon.com/ComicLab, and you could be watching the show. I'm waving to them right now at the live stream, and the show is archived every week, so in case you need to step away for life, love, or learning, you can watch the live stream archive, but it is going every week with a consistent chat along the side. Why did I say consistent? That makes it sound weird.
There's one thing we notice about you live stream is that you're consistent.
Why would you look for consistency in a live chat? Like, I'm enjoying the live chat, but I wish it was more consistent.
I wish it was consistent. I wish they would just find a lane and stay in it.
That's right. So, Brad, this entire show, if we have our druthers, I think could be filed under one big thing, which is company after company after company reminding us about why we self-publish. Wouldn't you think that could be the theme of this upcoming show?
Yeah, we're just as a little show note, we should mention this right at the top. We typically do news and updates at the midpoint of the show. And there's so much news going on in comics right now, and a couple of updates of stories that we've been tracking throughout the last year or so. This show, we're just starting out with news and updates because we've got so much. We know that it's going to carry us right through the middle of the show.
That's right.
And again, like Dave said, all of these have a theme, and it underlines over and over why Dave and I are such passionate advocates for self-publishing, owning and controlling your own work.
Yeah, with the huge caveat that absolutely it is more work. There are more hats to wear. There are more things to learn with self-publishing and owning and controlling your own career. But the alternate being losing your rights in a really painful way, such as the next item, which is that Oni Press, as many of you know, and this is a couple weeks old at this point, but Oni Press basically said, well, guess what? We're stopping everything. We're stopping the whole works. Am I right, Brad? I mean, what Oni Press basically shut up the shutters in a way.
Yeah, This coming in from Gizmodo. Quote, earlier in the week, Oni announced layoffs for senior staff that included Alex Segura, Senior Vice President of Marketing and Sales, their sales manager, their senior editor. At the time of this writing, its remaining senior staff are down to a skeleton crew. And there were some allegations, according to this article, that some of the folks hadn't been paid. They were like still waiting for checks to come.
Well, I can confirm that as of Comic-Con, talking to one of their artists, a friend of ours, that they don't need to be named, but their check had not yet arrived, Brad. So there was still some unpaid work, and that might just be timing in terms of there's been a big layoff. And so someone new has to take over accounts payable. We'll see. But it's not a good sign. The way I read it, Brad, and you can tell me how you read this whole thing with Oni, is that given that our predictions haven't necessarily come true with the pandemic, that comic book shops are all going to be doomed, right? A lot more have survived and thrived than we thought in the pandemic. But I would still posit that the business has taken an overall big enough hit that smaller shops like Oni have found it increasingly hard to do the classical business trade of selling to comic book shops at certain quantities. And so I think what happened is the powers that be at Oni decided we are better suited to be now an IP farm. We'll take everything that we own and have control over contractually, shop it around Hollywood as a TV show, as a video game, as a movie, and we're going to stop basically the act of producing comic books. That's how I read it from an outsider looking in. How do you read it, Brad? Oh,
well, I that's actually a much better analysis than I could personally offer. What I was more focused on is some of these people who had things that were ready to come out, publications, comics that they'd worked on for a long time that were ready to come out at the exact time that Oni Press was closing up shop. And like at the time that I checked in on them, they didn't know whether their books were going to come out. They didn't know whether this stuff was coming out. They didn't know how it was coming out. It's a nightmare. It's a nightmare. They don't know who's rights are going to take credence over this. And that was really where my head has been at, is how is terrified I'd be as a creator if I had something that was coming out through Oni Press.
Well, let's isolate. That's a great point, Brad. Let's isolate it on that, because when you sell a book to a publisher like an Oni, or you know, more broadly speaking, like a Boom or an IDW, we can all be honest about it. You're not making Jeff Bezos money by selling that book to those size publishers, right?
Right.
But there's a certain agility in that you're not doing some legacy comic, i.e. you're not doing the 40th iteration of Paste Pot Pete for Marvel, right? You're doing a new title that you're creating. The problem being, especially in a situation like this, you are signing away enough rights such that if Oni locks up, as they seem to be doing right now, or stop producing as they seem to be doing right now, you don't have the option to now take that title and bring it somewhere else or do your own thing with it. You're locked in. I mean, granted, there's obviously going to be legal maneuvers that you could do, but for the most part, you're locked in at that point, and you can't take your title elsewhere. You can't keep making it. You have to stop work. You're basically locked into whatever situation Oni has now put you in.
Yeah, and we're friends with Jim Zubkovich, who's at Jim Zub, or Jim Zub, I should pronounce that correctly, over at Twitter. And I'm just checking out, as of July 14th, I've been told my current Oni project is, quote, secure, though obviously it won't be announced at SDCC. Panel as originally planned. Fingers crossed, our team has been working hard. Now here's Zub. He's sitting there going, I don't even know, if they're going to announce it. I'm told it's secure, but do you really want your book to be put out by a company that's going out of business next Tuesday? Or I don't know when they're going out of business, but a business that is contracting so dramatically. I got to be honest with you. If I've got a choice between that book not coming out and that book coming out put out by a Skeleton Crew publisher, I don't know which one I choose.
I mean, at this point, if it's already in the works, God, that's a particular heartbreak, because you kind of can't. For one thing, you don't have a control over your own work to make the firm decision. For the most part, that decision is going to be made for you regardless of what you do at this point. If it's done, if it's submitted. So it's either going to be that Skeleton Crew is going to put it out in a haphazard kind of shitty way, or they're going to sit on it. And then you can do nothing about that, too. We've had friends, Brad, that produced whole works that then sat on a shelf because they, for a billion reasons, business-wise or financially, the company was like, we can't do it, we won't do it, we're not going to do it. And then they don't have the rights, they can't do anything, they can't continue the story, they can't go to part 2. It really is a heartbreaker. And it literally is one of the main reasons why we self-publish, is for that level of control, both on a macro and a micro level, of what we do and how we do and where it goes and how much we can do repeated volumes, continue the story on as needed.
And that's such an important consideration. And it's going to lead right into our next news story. Such an important consideration to take into mind when you're signing with a publisher is the amount of rights that they have, what kind of rights that they have, how you can get out of those rights. I remember years and years ago, Phil Folio talking about a project that he had done that had been, the publisher had gone out of business, but he still didn't have the rights to this creation of his. And then he had to go through and almost like sifting through to find a needle in a haystack, where those rights landed after the company filed for bankruptcy. Who got those rights? Who could, and then once he found it, could he get those rights back? This was from years and years ago. And it haunts me to this day. And that's why I want to, just on that note of who owns the rights, it's time for us to talk about that old comics favorite, Tokyo Pop. Like a bad penny, they keep showing up. And here they are again with another one of their contests. Interestingly enough, they're having another one of these, next manga star contests. The top prize is $1,000. I was looking back. They did a Manga Star, I think, another one of these contests, maybe in 2016, 2018. The top prize, $1,000. It hasn't gone up. It hasn't gone up a nickel. They're still offering that same, and by the way, that was crummy money back then. It's crummy money back now. I don't know that you need to do a whole lot of searching to find how bad Tokyo Pop is perceived by many of us in the creative industry, but they've popped up. And this goes all the way back to 1998. They popped up and blinked out so many times.
Yeah.
And one thing that they're known for, and I've never read their contract firsthand, but when you read all these people who have had experiences with them, you have a lot of people who report getting their rights taken control of, copyright taken control of, very difficult to get their intellectual property back. Yep. You've got a lot of people. Let me just put it to you conversely. There's not a lot of creators out there with something good to say about Tokyo Pop.
Yeah, so really, it's again not firsthand knowledge, but just a big flag with any company that like has anything resembling a contest or, oh, hey, you could win a chance to make our advertisement. And so 500 people submit, one person wins the chance and gets $400. Well, it's like, this is not what you want to do. These kind of contests, these kind of offers, these kind of contractual swings by companies. And you'll see it not just with small publishers like this, but with all sorts of advertising and creative companies of like, trying to get pro level work on the cheap, and then not even commensurately paying for it in a way that's sort of insulting. $1,000, what is that? It's just a big heads up for Brad and I that past generations of cartoonists have found this to not be worthwhile, and please keep your head on a swivel with this. And Brad, that brings us to our third company from the Why Do We Self-Publish list. And this is, let's do Substack next. That's a fun one.
Oh, okay.
So everyone can recall that Brad and I, at the time of the big announcements, there were these six-figure contracts being offered. Oh, this is changing the face of comics. We're getting a former Batman writer and the former assistant colorist on Green Lantern and the third-level letterer on Paste Pot Pete, and they're all coming to Substack. That's the second time I'm referencing Paste Pot Pete in today's show, by the way.
You can never reference him enough for my taste.
I know, really. We've got the whole creative team of Stiltman, and they're all coming over to Substack. But Brad, we said, and I think quite groundedly said, okay, it's a 365-day contract. Let's see how things are looking at 366 days from now. And I don't know that we are there yet. I don't know that we've even transversed the full 366 days, but things are already happening, Brad. And you want to share with folks what are the signs that are already appearing that Brad and I were right, that the one day after the year is up, we're going to see a big switch back to where people were traditionally making their money.
Right. Yeah. It basically comes down to that. I'm not going to call the person out by name, but he was one of those creators who took the Substack grant. Already 866 days later, he's announcing now that he's making his newsletter completely free. OK, we were going to keep quoting here. We were going to keep the comics over the subscription paywall, but quickly we decided why we wanted everyone to read, not just a few hundred paid subscribers. Skipping ahead, as of today, there will no longer be the subscription off option if you sign up for a paid subscription. We've shut that off. Okay. What he's saying here is, quote, the biggest change is that all posts will be available to everyone. There will no longer be a paywall for anything. We're keeping the paid option as a tip jar to support the crew who works on the get-togethers. And basically what he's saying here is that it just, the money didn't pan out. It just was not there. And part of that, frankly, is I don't know whether it's like a bad idea quite so much as my opinion on this has always been that running this kind of a business takes a certain type of approach, right? It's something that independent cartoonists, people who have not subsisted inside of the publishing structure, we've picked this up along the way. And you've got to work a business model like this. You've got to work it in a very specific way, and you've got to hustle. Yeah. And I'm not saying that this person didn't hustle, because I guarantee you, I didn't follow what he was doing.
No. In fact, I would say this is a person that knows their audience better than most creators that come out of a traditional system, But I think there's a couple key numbers to focus in on. One, just by point of clarification, Brad had said 866. It was 366 days, right? Not 866.
For some reason, I have 866 written on top of my paper, and I don't know what I was thinking, but thank you for that.
That's okay. Strokes come for us all. But the other number to focus in on is that they said this is a major creator in the sense that everyone would know who they are. They've won multiple Eisners. The money is great. They have a staff. But they said they only had a couple hundred paying subscribers to the Substack thing. And I want to make a parallel to this because it's the exact same thing that people are finding on Instagram, which is the only people making money on Instagram, like Substack, are the ones that the company themselves are paying because there's not enough money in the platform itself. So Instagram, of course, is desperate to fight off TikTok. And so they're paying people for videos. They're paying people for content. Please, God, don't post on TikTok. Post on Instagram. We're losing. We're losing to the teens. And Instagram is desperate to be cool, and so they're paying. But just like Substack, you have to be careful if you're walking that path because that spigot will someday be turned off. And Substack is clearly turning off the spigot, and there's nothing to replace it from the native subscriptions on Substack. Don't you think, Brad?
Yeah, this was reading from this newsletter post. This was something that was really telling to me. He said, no matter what the idea was, for every new paid subscription we'd get, one or two would drop off. Ha ha. We pretty much stayed at the same subscription number, and goes on to say, for an extended period of time. By the way, that's natural. That's normal. That's a part of running a subscription-based business.
That is true.
We've got churn every month. I guarantee you. And don't even get me started on declines, right, from people's credit card that get declined when they went up for the monthly charge. That's a part of this business. This is what you have. This is how you work it, right? You can't allow yourself to get disgusted or dismayed by that. You got to learn to do what it takes, learn those strategies. And there's a lot of stuff that we've talked about here on the podcast in the past to get past that churn. I step up my promotion towards the end of every month and at the beginning of every month for a very simple reason. I got to beat the churn. I got to beat the churn at the end of the month, and I got to make up for the churn at the beginning of that month.
Well, and this goes back to the really good point that Brad made a couple minutes ago, which is that these are folks that are just not used to this business model.
Yeah.
And so as hardworking as they might be, and they are, and as tuned into their audience as they might be, and they are, they're not used to this specific subscription type business model. And it's very different than soliciting a book through Diamond and getting it into shops and now telling all your readers to go pre-order it and then telling them to go order it when it drops. It's just a very different business model. And so I think, as we predicted, a lot of people are going to go to take that $100,000 from Substack, go, great, this is wonderful. And then at the end of the year, go, oh, the money's going away and there's not enough subscriptions, right? And so both fortunately and unfortunately, I think our prediction is coming very true, which is on day 366, people go, back I go to Image, back I go to Marvel, back I go to DC.
and we still have yet to find out what's going to happen on my prediction on what happens on day number 866, but that's neither here nor there.
That's right.
We've got another news item, as long as we're talking. Now, you might say, well, geez, and this is a good time to sign with one of those comics aggregators. Not so fast. Tapas lays off staff. This coming in from the website ICV2.com, written by Bridget Alverson, who's been reporting on comics for an awful long time. She's very smart. Tapas Media has laid off about 30% of its staff, according to a report at The Beat. The staff reductions, which have been rolling out over the past few weeks, come as parent company Kakao, which acquired Tapas from the prose platform Radish last year, appears to be consolidating the companies. So again, it's another one of these deals. The CFO, the CEO, and the director of publicity all been laid off. A bunch of people have lost their jobs. And from what I'm reading here, Tapastic is moving away from paying comics creators on their platform. And from what I understand, it was a very similar kind of situation as Webtoons had set up, where they were kind of paying and promoting certain people at the top, and then other people could publish there as well and perhaps move up into these positions. They're getting rid of that, from my understanding. and they are going to be concentrating on user-generated content.
Yeah, so 30% layoffs, not a small amount for a small to mid-sized company, and then also getting rid of user-created content. It's really interesting that the idea behind that now, I guess, Brad, is the whole thing is a farm team. Like no one's a pro, but they probably will have a kind of thing where if they think they can develop it into a TV show, a video game, a movie, they'll offer a very different kind of contract. And you know what? I say this not having reviewed the Tapastic contract. Maybe it already has that locked in as soon as you jump in on the farm team, a non-paid user-created content farm team. So, as is always the case, be careful with those contracts. Get it reviewed. Yes. I'm currently hiring a lawyer right now to review the Webtoons contract from before I move Drive over. So, because as I said before in the show, I want to mirror Drive, but the last thing I want to do, Brad, is having developed Drive for 10 or 11 years, is accidentally sign over the rights to like a moron to Webtoons by signing up for a free mirroring, that kind of thing.
And that's something that you really do want to watch with Tapastic, because they've got a record. They've got a history of sliding things into their TOS, one of which I was just trying to find because I'm sure I did something on it for webcomics.com. But they slid into their TOS kind of a right of first refusal, where they said, do you remember that? Where they said that, they were going to speak on behalf of their artists who weren't very smart business people.
Right. We'll take care of you.
Yes. And meanwhile, if it was opt-in, it would be great. But it was not opt-in. You just signed up for it when they updated their TOS. So if you are publishing on Tapastic, keep a close eye every time they update their terms of service. And if you're not, take that into account. Because as my feeling is, and this is just my opinion, as they continue to constrict, they might get a little bit desperate and start to pull some of that stuff again. You want to keep your eyes open if you're there.
Absolutely. And here's sort of the problem that I and everyone else is going to have. I would like to mirror Drive, my science fiction comic, on Webtoons purely for the idea of expanding the audience such that a tiny percentage of that newly expanded audience will join me on Patreon, right? That's the basic idea. But I'm going to have to pay, I don't know, a couple $100, maybe $500, $600 to have a lawyer review that contract. We'll see how much they charge. And then, every time they update that terms of service, keep in mind, I'm going to have to re-review that. It's not a one-time thing. So that cost is an ongoing cost. And so the Patreon, the new Patreon subscribers dang well better more than make up for the lawyerly fees of having someone review that every time. Because even though I'm a smart guy and I can read a contract well and I know basically what to look for, I'm not a lawyer. And there's a reason why ththose things are made 20, 30 pages deep sometimes, those terms of service. They'll hide some little phrase in on page 28, subparagraph 2, clause 3, subclause 4A, and then you don't see it until a lawyer looks at it.
Coming from a graphic design background, you're hitting right onto something that is another Niagara Falls moment for me. And that is, as a graphic designer, we know how to make things readable. That's like day one, you learn how to make things readable. And once you know how to make things readable, you learn how to make things unreadable. And every contract, every legal contract, every terms of service is purposefully done to make it hard to read. Why? They don't want you knowing that stuff. There's a reason they don't make it easy to read. It's because to a certain extent, they're a little bit scared of what would happen if you really understood some of these TOS agreements.
So anyway, putting a button on that. Also, if Tapastic is having trouble, it is not outside the realm of possibility that Webtoons will soon announce sometime in the 6, 12, 18 months. It could be, listen, as an outsider looking in, it could be that Webtoons has been eating Tapastic's lunch, and that's why these layoffs are happening. Or it could be that there's fundamentally a shortfall in this model of business. And so maybe we should all just keep an eye on Webtoons. Maybe they're headed this direction as well. So just a little note, always be careful when you jump in on one of these sites. Make sure you are getting the contract reviewed. Make sure you don't immediately sign away rights that you didn't even assume you were signing away. And don't get stuck as you would get stuck with a poor Oni writers and artists who now have a book that they have no control over. So be careful what you sign up to. Hey, if you're listening while you work, take a minute to stand and stretch.
And while you're doing that, we're going to tell you why you should join us on Patreon.
When you do, you're going to get hours and hours of podcasts that we recorded just for backers.
And exclusive Patreon posts that go even deeper on ComicLab topics.
And access to our exclusive Discord server, which is a thriving community of professional cartoonists.
So you can support the show you love and get tons of actionable resources for your own cartooning.
And listen, if you can't swing a pledge this month, we get it. No worries.
Yeah, listen, you can still support the show by rating us wherever you get your podcasts.
Just leave a 5-star review and a few kind words.
That, along with mentions on social media, is incredibly helpful.
Now, everybody, let's talk comics.
Dave, we've got one more news story to round out the day, and it's Shopify. This coming in from CNBC. Shopify stock sinks 14% after the company says it will lay off 10% of its workers. Dave, that is roughly 1,000 workers on its global workforce that are going to be out of jobs. In a memo to the staff, the CEO acknowledged that he had misjudged how long the pandemic-driven e-commerce boom would last. And amid a broader pullback in online spending, Shopify would move to cut a number of roles. Dave Kellett, what does this mean for independent cartoonists?
Well, hopefully in the immediate day-to-day run of your business, for those of us like myself that use Shopify for our stores, hopefully it does not mean any noticeable drop in quality or service or anything like that. I think what this means is, Brad, for those who are keeping track of like Target and Walmart and Costco and Sam's Club in the US, a lot of these bigger box stores, because everybody had discretionary, not everybody, certain types of shopper had discretionary spending in the pandemic, that they weren't going on trips, they weren't going to restaurants, but they had that itch of wanting to do something from the couch. So they spent a ton on barbecue fire pits and outdoor furniture and loungewear for around the house. You know, we all bought sweats. And what happened is a lot of factories were told to ramp up. Target bought a bunch of stuff. Costco bought a bunch of stuff. And now everyone's like getting back into the world, even though it's not the end of the pandemic. We're going on trips again. We're going to restaurants again. A lot of that discretionary spending is not going to physical items, but to experiences. Yeah. And so I don't know if you've seen, Target has had to have these massive sales and like wholesale trucks rediverted to basically secondhand shops because they have way too much loungewear, way too many outdoor barbecue pits, way too many outdoor furniture sets. And so apparently if you live next to one of those places in Kentucky or whatever that sell the secondhand Target place, you're living on nothing but outdoor furniture because Target's getting rid of all of it.
Yeah, good time to buy a grill, I'll tell you that right now.
Yeah, exactly. So I think this actually kind of makes sense in that a lot of companies misjudged how quickly consumers would change their spending habits. Yeah. So I don't necessarily ping Shopify on this because they're a fairly well-run company. But I do think that a lot of otherwise smart CEOs misjudged how long this would last. And to be fair, at least for Target, think about that ordering, Brad. A lot of that ordering has to be done 9-12 months ahead of time. It's hard to judge when this is going to end.
Well, yeah, and you've got to be a little bit of a forecaster, and you can't blame them for getting caught flat-footed on this because, let's face it, nobody knew, and nobody still knows what's coming up in the next 3 months, let alone 6 months.
Yeah, and listen, to be fair, on the grand scale of human history, we have had pandemics before. We've had pandemics that lasted 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, but we've never had a consumer-based economy the way we have it now, where you have to forecast production of things while there's a pandemic raging. That's literally never happened before. You know, briefly in the 60s, there was that one with 68 or whatever, but there was the swine flu or whatever it was. But we haven't really had a long running years on years end pandemic in modern commercial planning. So it's kind of a first for all sorts of people.
Absolutely. So now let's start moving into some update category. This headline coming in from Gizmodo.com. Zuck says Instagram is going to suck twice as much next year. Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg said in an earnings call that he expects AI recommended content to make up for more than 30% of the Instagram feed next year. Dave Kellett, what does this mean?
Well, I mean, listen, a couple things. TikTok in general is eating Instagram's lunch. We all know that. In that the teens and the 20-somethings are all using TikTok and not Instagram, which has its own problems from a data standpoint. We've talked about that in the past, about where those servers are and where that data is being shunted at times. But Instagram, though, as we know, is paying people to produce content for Instagram, desperate to get people to make videos for Instagram and not TikTok, desperate for users to stay on Instagram and not TikTok. So the money from Facebook's coffers is flowing.
Yeah.
But that also means that they're leaning hard into AI-driven algorithms that show you more of what you want. So, for example, when I was writing the dinosaurs book, good God, my Instagram feed was chock-a-block with dinosaurs. I didn't hate it. It was fun. But good God, the AI was like, they were really thirsty on the dinosaurs for me on that one. But so we're going to see more of that, which I think, Brad, you've actually said this better than I have in the past, which is that's terrible for creators, but actually users like AI-driven content algorithms.
I mean, let's face it. That's why everybody loves TikTok so much. I was talking with my wife about this last night. I'm like, when I'm on TikTok, I don't go through the people that I followed. I go through my For You page, which is all AI content. It's all stuff that algorithmically they assume that I'm going to like. And by the way, I'm just gonna be honest with you about my TikTok watching habits, even though it may be oversharing a little bit. Every now and again, I'll get a live feed of bowling league night, and
thank God it was bowling. All right, keep going.
I will watch strangers bowling for 20 or 30 minutes. I'll just sit there and watch them. I'm fascinated. Cornhole is the same way. I'll watch people playing cornhole for a ridiculous amount of time. But then what happens is, like, if I broke out Twitter right now, I guarantee you it's league night somewhere right now. If I broke out Twitter, I'd be greeted with a live feed of somebody bowling on league night. And I'd stop recording this show and watch them. The algorithm is amazingly good at fun. And by the way, I don't follow any of these bowlers. I don't care about them.
Yeah, the AI knows to give it to you anyway.
But I just like watching bowling. I just enjoy. Are they going to get a strike? Are they dropping the ball? Some of these guys have amazing smooth releases, and it's like poetry. I'll sit there and watch them for 20 minutes at a time. For creators, this is horrible news. But if it's going to get me more bowling on my timeline, I'm here for it.
Yeah, I mean, in broad strokes, what this means for cartoonists is that Instagram is definitely leaning away from photos, which is how they got started, and into video. Because that's clearly where the user retention is, where they can get more advertisement in front of you because you're on the system longer with videos than you are with photos. Yeah. So the system that worked kind of okay when Instagram first started and then passingly less okay when Facebook bought it is going to be increasingly unhelpful for the classical cartoonist that doesn't want to produce videos.
Right.
So that's just something to keep in mind. I will say, though, in countering to that, as a counterpoint to that, Instagram is going to allow sharing going forward. And that may be helpful towards attribution of like, hey, it's not a repost. This is Brad Guigar originally did this, and now I'm sharing it with my broader audience. And so that could potentially, if they do it right, be good for Brad and for cartoonists. So I don't know why Brad. Good for cartoonists of all stripes.
Yeah, Brad's doing precious little on Instagram at all these days. But this was another reason I really like the ComicLab Discord channel. Because I had seen a tweet from a copyright lawyer that pointed out that Instagram thing that they were going to have shares, and the the copyright lawyer, being a copyright lawyer, pointed out that if people are going to share your stuff, that might be opening the door to some copyright infringement. And I came to the Discord server, basically sharing that copyright lawyer's tweet and saying, hey, a little heads up, just something for us to think about. Chris Hallback, who, when it comes to Instagram, when Chris Hallback is E.F. Hutton, when he talks, I listen, right?
E.F. Hutton, what a reference for only 50-year-olds that you just made. No one under 45 knows what E.F. Hutton is, that advertisement campaign. My God.
I wonder, they're still going, aren't they?
I don't know, but all I know is that's right up there with me making a Fuller Brush reference.
Yeah,
so that's
that might be a little bit dated.
We're
might be a
dating
little bit
ourselves
dated.
here.
But Chris pointed out that basically what this is going to allow Instagram to do, which has never been part of their platform before, is that you can share other people's work the way you do on Twitter and never think about it, the way you do on Facebook and never think about it. And sharing your work is a big part of broadening your audience base. It's an important part. And if that sharing is in the traditional way, where it also includes your Instagram handle, then that is an attribution that is valuable for many of us. I was never so happy to be corrected because I immediately thought, oh, this is terrible, this copyright lawyer. And Halbach is like, and I think Halbach is in that strata. And I don't know this for sure. I'm talking tales. But I think he sees some stuff like a few days before the rest of us do, because he's at that level. And I think he got a better understanding of it. So once again, the Discord server, even when it's me who's got to say, oh, I think I had the wrong idea at first, really good for giving you a better view of what's happening in the world.
Yeah. But on the broader strokes, again, everyone is all the bigger platforms are aside from Twitter, are sort of learning that video is where they want to be. Yeah. And they're leaning into that. So it's just something to really keep on all of our radars, because it's not necessarily a good thing for cartoonists that the platforms lean so heavily into video. Yeah. We might still be able to swim in those waters, but it's just something to be cognizant of as the days go forward, because thankfully, Twitter, being sort of the slow and plodding one, is still a visual and text-based social media platform. It hasn't yet dove off the TikTok diving board, so we'll see what happens. But anyway, just something to keep aware of. Yeah,
believe me, they've tried, but they try to copy everybody, and it just doesn't work. And people are just like, Twitter, we want it to be what it is.
Twitter is like me playing basketball in 4th grade. It's just a lot of embarrassing tripping, and the ball's going where it shouldn't, and nothing's going in the basket. And then if Elon Musk buys it, it'll just be a trash fire. So we'll see what happens.
Well, so it doesn't sound like we have to worry about that. But Dave, as long as we're on the topic of Instagram, you had an interesting Instagram story to share in regards to your recent Kickstarter, DinoKickstarter.com.
DinoKickstarter.com, by the way, still wrapping up. I think if this show goes live when I think it will, DinoKickstarter.com should still be active. And I do really genuinely think you should go check it out. I'm incredibly proud of the book, and I hope you will join us in bringing that book to life. It's going to be beautiful, and I'm really proud of it. But one of the things that I should say as an update for the show is Carl Kerschel, who is one of our favorite artists and a delightful human being, gave us the suggestion, hey, you really need to lean into that micro tracking that Kickstarter offers, where every URL can be a unique URL to a specific outlet. So if you're going to tweet it, use the unique URL for Twitter, use the unique one for Instagram, use the unique one for past Kickstarter updates, or for Facebook, or for this or that, right? So any place that you post about your Kickstarter, use this micro URL tracking system. And I'll be honest, I knew I had availed myself a little bit of it, but I never really leaned into it. And Carl was like, trust me, it's a lot more work. You have to be more stick-to-itive about it. But if you really lean into it, you'll see the results of what works and where things are working and how they're working. And I have to say, this is the first Kickstarter that I've done it. I so far have generated 50 unique URLs, and I'm tracking each one. Yeah. So if I post something very specifically on the subreddit for paleontology, the Anatomy of Dinosaurs book, I know as of right now that has brought in 2 purchasers of the book, which I can tell myself those are 2 people that did not know my work beforehand. Because what are the odds? Yeah. That's a new subreddit that I've never been on before. So how great that was worth the time and effort. That $120 that those 2 people brought in, that was worth the time and effort to post on paleontology. What I'm getting at is, first of all, a thank you to Carl for sharing that wisdom with us. It's really good. And also, I have to say, now having done it, I will do it again. It is a pain in the butt while you do it, but the results speak for themselves. I'm able to track what works.
Absolutely. So, Dave, now that we've gotten through the news and the updates, I think we are in a good position to take a couple questions. Oh, but before we do that, we've got to take a quick moment to talk about what's happening on November 12th. Dave and I are going to be out at the Charles Schulz Museum to celebrate what would have been his 100th birthday, and we're going to be doing it in a great way. Dave and I are going to go out there to the Schulz Museum November 12th and do a live recording of the ComicLab podcast.
That's right. And we're incredibly honored by it and thankful to the museum and to Jeannie for having us out for Schulz's 100th, because that's what a lovely thing. And also, it's so nice to be going out for this specific event because they are going to have more than just the live ComicLab podcast recording in front of a live studio audience. They're going to have a completely separate second panel with a panel of experts, which we're excited to see as well. There's going to be events that weekend, special showings that weekend, special things on display for his 100th. So it's really going to be a big to-do. And we, again, really would love to invite you out. Santa Rosa and that part of Northern California in general is lovely, especially that time of year, not too hot, not too cold in November. And because, Brad, in summer, it can get up to 110 in Santa Rosa. But so it's going to be perfect in November. Yeah. The wine up there is delicious. I got to tell you, if you have not tried California wines, Bradley J is going to be trying some on this trip.
I hear they've got the really good boxes up there. That's going to be that's going to be something else.
The catchphrase is only the best cardboard is what that's how they advertise to Brad Geiger.
I often go to the bar and I'll say, give me a Merlot and make it have corners.
Give me a Merlot. Hold the box. That's what Brad says.
Yeah. So that's wonderful. And we're going to be down there. And by the way, we're hoping we see you, the ComicLab audience, there. And if you do, you could get a chance to get one of our exclusive ComicLab Let's Talk Comics pins. You can't buy these. You can't buy these. The only way to get them is show up at an event, and we're both going to be at this event handing these things out like they were Tic Tacs.
And let's be honest, this is one of the rare occasions to see Brad and I together in person. I think the last time we did it was 3.5 years ago, 4 years ago, maybe. Yeah. So it's been a few days, and so it's going to be fun. You're going to see the Schulz Museum, which is amazing. Yeah. There's a bunch of wineries to check out in the area. You're right up the road from San Francisco if you wanted to go do that. Mm-hmm. It really would be a lovely trip. You're going to get the free pin, and also we're going to really try to do a sort of a group walk around to the museum, which will be delightful. So, and also for those coming to the show, and also for Patreon folks that can't make it out, do submit Schulz specific questions to the show. Yeah. We're going to be reviewing and picking out the best ones leading up to November 12th. We're thinking the best type of question is Schulz versus modern cartooning. Schulz, if he was living today and starting today, how would he do it? Yeah. That kind of thing, I think, would be the most appropriate for Brad and I to speak to on Schulz's legacy, because they're going to have big wigs talking about Schulz's legacy that knew and have researched his work more than we have. Yeah. So I think the more fun thing would be a modern cartoonist take on Schulz's creativity and his adaptation abilities. And so questions along those lines would be great.
Absolutely. And speaking of questions, I've got a question from one of our Patreon backers, David, that I think you're going to really like. This coming in to us from a Patreon backer who says, I recently began drawing a new character for a story and was super pleased with how the design was turning out. It wasn't until a week later when I was watching an animated show and I realized my character unintentionally bared a resemblance to that of the show's main character. Egad, what do I do? I obviously don't want it to appear that I've copied a pre-existing character, but I also really like the design, and my style was already similar to that of the show style. Is there a fine line here, Dave? If I were to sum this up, this question goes like this: I committed a plagiarism. Do I have to fix it?
Brad, I made a plagiarism. Do I have to clean it up? Oh, God. First of all, I feel your pain in this moment. Yeah. Because as we know from very recent shows, I was very excited about my idea pitch that I wanted to do for a comic called Kaiju and Cowboys, right? And only to find that there is a pre-existing title called, it's a reverse of it, Cowboys and Kaijus. Right. And I was like, darn it. Oh, there goes. Yeah. And remember, I had all the excitement in the world because the title for me was the energy of it. I was like, oh yeah, that captures in 3 words what the whole concept is. I love it. Anyway, I had to, obviously, I had to give up that title. No, I can't. Just because I'm close on a plagiarism, just because it was an accidental plagiarism, doesn't mean it's not a plagiarism. You can't, you really, with all that's inside you as an artist, you can't do that, even accidentally. You just have to say, oh, well, great minds think alike, but you got there first. That one is yours. I will now change my concept. What do you think, Brad?
Yeah. And by the way, the fact that you really, really, really like your design, that also doesn't play into this decision.
Yeah, exactly. Brad, I really love this small mouse that I drew that has these big round ears and these little red pants with the white button. Does it matter that Disney has something like that, Brad? But I really like it, Brad. So if I really like it, doesn't that null and void the legality of it?
Yeah, we and by the way, we're teasing you, my friend, because we know you don't think that that's like a legal place for you to hang your hat, but we do feel your pain because we both been there. And I would imagine anyone that's created anything for any amount of time has come to find out they're a little bit close to something, and what you've got to do is you've got to make your design, especially now that you know about it. And let's face it, maybe you're wishing you hadn't watched that animated series so you had plausible deniability. But you're saving yourself a lot of trouble, because if this animated series has any amount of fans at all, you were going to get hounded by people on this aspect of your character for however long you were going to do it. People were going to, at the best, they were going to say, oh, geez, I can tell you were inspired. At the worst, they were going to say that it was a ripoff. It was going to be a thorn in your side for a long time. So this is the time to fix it. And what you've got to do is make your character noticeably different from that other character. And you can do that any number of different ways. But this is a good chance. I'll just say right off the top of my head, this is a good chance to go back to those basics of character design and also maybe fix some problems that you haven't identified yet. And what I'm thinking right at the top of that list is the silhouette test. Remember the silhouette test, Dave?
Yeah. The silhouette test basically lets you say that in pure black, your character would be differentiated enough where people could go, that's Mickey Mouse. That's Roadrunner. That's Bugs Bunny. Just by the blackness of the silhouette test. And absolutely. And partially, I think what's happening here, and it's worth acknowledging, is that all of us, myself included, Brad included, you included, everyone included, when we first start drawing, mimicry is how we learn. Mimicry is how we develop and grow as an artist. Yeah. The great masters did that too. They all painted after one another and then found their style. And I think what's happening here and what has happened is that subconsciously you were taking in information, as we all do, right? You were running it through the filter. And I think what happened is what your brain and your hands spit out was just too close. Yeah. Because you're still kind of in the mimicry stage. And that's okay. That's a natural thing that happens. The trick is to, just like Brad said, keep drawing, go back to the drawing board, isolate what you are the key features of that character, and intentionally now move away from that, If they're short, go tall. If they're big, go small. If they're in yellow, go red. What I'm saying is, you can literally make intentional choices to now move away from it.
Yeah, and again, take a look at how that character fits in among your other cast, and do that silhouette test. This again, I think this is a chance that you can fix any number of things that need to be fixing, and kill two birds with one stone. I know my first blush, my first instinct would be to make a small change. Like if this character has a red coat, I'd give my character a green coat, right? Or if he has a mustache, I'd give him a mustache and a beard. Remember, it's got to be noticeably different. You've got to have a few degrees apart from this. And now that you know that it's there, you've got to make it noticeably different from that. Don't just stop at half measures. I know. Here's the deal. I know that you have fallen in love with your character design, but what's going to happen is, and I can tell you this from experience of somebody that's been drawing characters for a long time, this thing ain't as precious as you think it is. Right now, it's just like we've talked about before. You're in the goo-goo-eyed falling in love stage, right? It's almost like a relationship. It's all hearts and rainbows and you're goo-goo-eyed, give it a little bit of time and you'll, if familiarity breeds contempt, as you get more familiar with this character that you yourself created, you're going to see that there's a lot of stuff that you wished you would have fixed in the first place. And that you probably, if you're like me, just quietly fix as you're going along. I do lots of character design on the fly, where all of a sudden somebody's nose gets a little bit shaped up a little bit differently, or somebody's costume takes on a different angle. Don't get too despondent. This thing ain't as precious as you think it is. It's a project. And if you take some of that emotion out of it and look at it more objectively, you'll see some things that you're happy you're addressing while you've got the chance.
And also, I want to pick up on a phrase that Brad just used, where Brad was saying, and if you look at this character that you designed, I know that Brad had all the good intentions of saying that, but I want to unpack that because I want to return to the idea that maybe you didn't design this, in the sense that your subconscious took in this show, took in this character somehow in the sort of broader scope of cultural life. You saw an aspect of this design and your brain took it in the filter. It probably sat at the back of your brain for a while and came out kind of whole cloth, similar to what they were originally designed as, you know? And I say this because I think this is a helpful example. I've now done 5,000 Sheldon comics, right? Mm-hmm. The first year or two when I was doing Sheldon, I had an accidental plagiarism moment. And I think we handled it as best we could, which is, here's what happened. I created for Sheldon a sentient toaster that was very angry. And it was going to be a short run story. It wasn't going to last more than 5, 6, 7 comics and then be done with it, right? About a week later, I get a very kind email from Rich Stevens of Diesel Sweeties going, hey, I don't know if you know this, but, or not, I don't know. It wasn't the phrase, I don't know if you know this, but just like, hey, this sentient toaster that you have is very similar to my sentient toaster that I had a year or so ago. And I will be honest, I was not a big Diesel Sweeties reader, but the odds are I read that Diesel Sweeties a year ago. Yeah. It went to the back of my brain. It sat there long enough where both forgetfulness kicked in, but just enough memory of it stick around where I thought it was my idea and I thought it was coming from me. But the whole cloth idea was probably from Rich Stevens. So of course I took it down and I apologized to Rich, and I was embarrassed, but it gave me a once burned, twice shy kind of thing about like making 100% sure that the ideas that I'm working with are coming from me, you know?
And I remember how you replaced that character too, and I thought it was a brilliant idea. You took that character and replaced him with somebody completely original. It was this guy that had just ended up a stint in the Navy, really had an affinity for spinach, had a corncob pipe, and he was he had big forearms. I remember with an anchor right there, and I thought, Dave, that's a good job.
My character poop eyeballs. Yes, I remember that. Yes. He was a really unique and one-off character that I created whole cloth. No, what I'm saying is, though, creativity is a weird thing in that these ideas get stuck way in the back of your brain. And sometimes a couple months go by, a couple years go by, and you still think that it's your idea because there's just enough forgetfulness that comes in to say, oh, you know what? No, we saw this on a Simpsons episode, or oh, we saw it on a Family Guy episode, or oh, this was in a Marvel movie 6 years ago or something. And you're like, oh, no, this is my idea. Nope, it came from somewhere else and it's been sitting at the back of your brain for a while,
Yeah. Oh, geez. I'm so glad you brought that up. There has been something that's been sitting at the back of my brain, and this is a perfect time to bring it up. What has been sitting in the back of my brain is that we've done another episode of ComicLab, and it's time for us to bring this one to a close when I say you've been listening to ComicLab, the show about making comics and making a living from comics.
Smooth like butter, your hosts have been my friend Brad Guigar, the editor of webcomics.com and the creator of Evil Inc. at evil-comic.com.
And my close personal friend Dave Kellett, the co-director of the comics documentary Stripped and the cartoonist of Sheldon at sheldoncomics.com and Drive at drivecomic.com. And believe you me, you still got time to jump in on that An Enemy of Dinosaurs Kickstarter over at dinokickstarter.com.
Oh, just as a point of correction, Brad, it's actually pronounced dinokickstarter.com.
Oh, what did I say? I thought I said dinokickstarter.com.
No, it's dinokickstarter.com.
Okay.
That's the correct pronunciation.
So it's not, like, for example, you're not doing like a Flintstone thing, calling it dinokickstarter.com, which would be spelled the same way, D-I-N-O. It's
No,
not
in this
Dino.
case, it's Dino Kickstarter, just DINO
Dino
Kickstarter.com. So
Kickstarter.com.
that just for point of clarification,
Right.
it's DinoKickstarter.com. Anyway,
And that's
the
7.
Comic Lab, what's that?
And that's 7.
And we got to 7. Now you're going there. You're typing it in without even knowing what you're doing. The Comic Lab theme song is used with permission from Andy Creighton at theworldrecord.net, and this episode was edited by Matt Woodard of Woodsong Productions over at www.woodsong.media.
If you love Comic Lab, you can rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify, where we're really having a great time, getting some real traction over there on Spotify. And you may hear your review featured on future episodes.
And Comic Lab is made possible by your support on patreon.com/comiclab. So we'll go ahead and say that twice. Patreon.com/comiclab. So, Brad, hold on. I want to jump back real quick to talk about you watching bowling on TikTok.
Oh, I love it so much.
Okay, first of all, this is so pure and sweet that you're just watching bowling going, that's a good turnover on that one. Oh, but what I would kill for is a tiny little microphone just next to your mouth when someone has a really good, I don't know what they even call it, a bowl. Oh. And what kind of exclamation could we hear from a Brad Geiger if someone has?
I mean, really, I will kind of squeal like a small animal, because there is something about, listen, you've seen bowling, all right? Now, any schmuck can walk up to the line and drop the bowling ball and it goes rolling down the alley. But when you see a really beautiful release where there's no drop, it is right there, just skids right into the lane. And some of these guys have these amazing arcs on their backswing, and then they'll bring it through and just like butter, that ball will hit the alley and just spin right out there. It really is absolutely spine chilling to watch it done right. I'm not making this up. I will watch this for
That's why I find it so pure, is because I believe you when you say this. But like, I'm imagining if I put my tiny little microphone by your, like, and here comes Greg Stevens. Greg's been bowling a great season so far. He's on the 10th. What is it? The 10th frame, 10th pin. What's it called? The 10th frame. 10th. He's on the 10th frame, and he's back. And you just hear from Brad like, just watching, just almost vaguely like he's being served ice cream. Just, oh God, delicious.
Just watch this guy. Look at the backswing. Oh my!
Like borderline creepy. You watching bowling? Just,
and my wife looking over saying, "What are you watching on your phone?" What? And I'm like, "Bowling," and she doesn't know whether to be disappointed or more disappointed.
What trash are you watching on? It's just Bob Lebowski like going, "Oh yeah, I'm ready to bowl here. I've got the ball, and I've been working in Chicago for 3 years." By the way, bowling is amazing because the physiques are the exact opposite of any other sport in the world. It's a guy who's actively horking down his fourth sausage back at the table, and they're like, and now next up, Martin Lebowski, and he's ready to bowl. Okay, hold on, I just got to finish this sausage, and I'm ready to bowl. And the guy, he normally drives like library delivery trucks for a living, and then he's an amazing bowler on the weekends, and he's throwing 300s.
Yeah. It's one of the few I mean, a bowling alley is a magical place. It's one of the few places you can still find Schlitz on tap. And that's